We'll wait a couple more minutes for the folks to answer.
Like by the time you get to September, it's so easy. So it's like, but there's some really beautiful weather in September. And then October. Tim, you watch at the WP and Summit today, right?
No, I was not.
I saw a guy that
Were you?
looked like you, yeah.
I don't think so.
That's Tim, but
No, it wasn't me.
She emailed me before, so I thought she was coming, but
all right.
Last I heard not.
okay.
I didn't run into that person again.
Oh,
Tell for sure.
it just left a question in your mind.
Yes, exactly.
Everybody else. Okay, we'll get started. Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending tonight's Oregon Area Fire-EMS District meeting. We will now call the OAFED Commission and Boards to order, July 31st at 6:33. The OAFED Commission will now come to order. Jason, can you have a roll call?
Sure. Tim Higgins? Here. Jeff Hodgson?
Here.
Steve Jernigan?
Here.
Kent Knudsen? Here. And Jason Mankey, president.
Very good, thank you. And Town of Dunn?
All right, Town of Dunn, we have Steve Greb and Jeff Hodgson, and Rosalind Gaussman is absent tonight.
has come to order. Town of Oregon.
And as part of tonight's joint meeting, the Oregon Town Board will come to order, and Walzer here, Fitzgerald,
Here.
Jernigan, here, Kai,
Here.
LeBron.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Town of Rutland.
Town of Rutland meeting will come to order. Supervisor Dorn.
Here.
Supervisor Williams.
Here.
Kent Knutson here. We have our quorum.
Thank you. Village of Oregon.
Call the Village Board of Oregon to order. Clerk, call the roll, please.
Tim Higgins.
Here.
Tom Kirchdorfer.
Here.
Jason Mankey.
Here.
Lynn McDaniel. Here. Amanda Peterson.
Here.
Phil Van Campen.
Here.
And Carleen Veshen is absent this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 2 on the agenda is selection of a meeting chairperson. I believe that's from an old agenda format, I would think, unless there is any reason why we should be calling another chairperson this evening.
Yeah, I'm not really sure where that came from, Jeff, but by default, you have been the chair unless someone objects.
Traditionally,
Yes.
commission chair.
The commission chair has been the chair of this meeting.
Correct.
Yes.
No objections, we will continue. Okay, introductions of community board representative and staff. And we'll go with the same order. Town of Dunn.
Steve Grubb, Chair, Town of Dunn.
Kathy Hasslinger, the clerk treasurer, Town of Dunn.
Jeff Hodson, supervisor. And move on to Town of Oregon.
Carl Walzer, Chair.
Lori Fitzgerald, board member.
Steve Jernigan, supervisor.
Arlen Kai, Supervisor. Tim LeBron, Supervisor.
Thank you. Town of Rutland.
Kent Knutson, chair.
Sue Williams, supervisor.
Jim Dorn, Supervisor.
Thank you. And Village of Oregon.
Phil Van Campen, Village President.
Jason Mankey, trustee.
Tom Kirchdorfer, Trustee.
Tim Higgins, trustee.
Amanda Peterson, trustee.
Lynn McDaniel, trustee. I'm Candy Jones, I'm the village clerk.
Martin Shanks, Village Administrator.
Lisa Levinska, the finance director.
Great, thank you. Pardon? Okay. And we have Chief Linsmeyer here, of course, this evening.
I was wondering who that was.
What's that?
I was wondering who you were.
Are we missing anybody else?
One of my aliases,
Okay, I think we're good there then. Moving on to item 4, our business this evening. A, review financial statements with the auditor's report for 2023. In a nutshell, our revenues were higher than budgeted, expenditures were lower than budgeted. Net change in budgeted fund balance was a positive $175,000. Total fund balance at the end of 2023 was $1.13 million. Johnson & Block found that $237,000 of deposits exceeded FDIC insurance limits. We are currently seeking additional assurance from that financial institution.
That's been resolved already.
That has been resolved,
Yes.
right? Correct.
Mhm, yeah.
Thank you.
I
Perfect.
think back in March.
Yep. Okay, great. They also found a 2024 training fee recorded as a 2023 expense in the amount of $4,500, which has also been addressed. And in a nutshell, that is an overview of that. Chief, you have anything else?
Just on the 23 budget, again, as anytime you have a fire EMS district, as everybody that sits around this table knows, there's a lot of EMS calls that we go on and that kind of stuff, Medicare, Medicaid, the reimbursements on that. There's always the questions about all the stuff that we write off and all that kind of stuff. Those are just the state and federal amounts that we get back in our revenue dollars. I've said this before, Phil's been around for a long time. Some of you have heard me say this before. With all of the moving triangle parts of a budget for a fire and EMS district, I don't know how many years I can keep this thing in the black. Again, when I say black, I mean we're, again, $174,000 on a couple $1 million operation, knowing that we're going to have 1,400 EMS calls, another 600 fire calls in a year, and how that all plays out at the end with our expenses and our overtime and just all of the unknowns. I think it's a good testament to not only the group that sits around me, but the advice that I give them so that we can make these decisions to kind of keep it in the operating where we are. This last year, of course, as most of you know in the commission, if they're reporting back to the local municipalities, we settle our union contract, which is now we got a 4-year contract with our organized labor folks. That basically goes through 26. With that, there were some unknowns and that kind of stuff, and some of our hiring that we wanted to do a year ago or so with our potential of arbitration and ongoing costs with legal staff and accountants and all that other kind of stuff. We cleverly held some of those positions back and made sure that we kept this operation in a positive number instead of putting things in the other way. So again, kudos to the board, to the groups, and for everybody listening and taking the advice of that. The fire chief is only just one voice and trying to give some direction, but ultimately it's the board and the administration of the fire district that keeps these things together. And as Phil can contest, and Jeff, because he's been here since 2016, since I've been here, it's one of those things that we have been very fortunate growing from about, what do you think, Phil and Jeff, probably about a $300,000 fund balance up to where we are today with some positive things and some of the directions that we did. So again, right now we're, knock on wood, sitting fairly well.
Everything seems to indicate that at this point, based on the auditor's report. There's 2 documents, one of the 39-page financial statements with independent auditor's report. I don't know if everybody got that.
Everybody did, because they had Candy and Martin put that in the packet, so we sent that out just as additional information. And should you have any questions on that, you can either contact myself, Lisa, or any of the board members. But we had a good presentation on that, like Jeff said, a month ago, and the board adopted that for 23. We moved that all forward. So again, information, full disclosure, we want folks to have that. And again, tonight I gave a couple hard copies for everybody to take back to their municipalities to have some historic files on folder for that.
So if you had a chance to review that, and also the financial statement overview by Johnson Block also, which is a more condensed version of the auditor's report. If you had a chance to review that. And are there any questions, comments, anything like that on the auditor's report or the overview? Okay, hearing none. We will move on to...
I just have one question. How long
Yes.
have we been with Johnson & Block for our audit?
Help me, Phil, probably for,
Since at least 2005.
Is there a plan to have that audited by somebody else, a new set of eyes?
I know that a number of years ago, probably now maybe about 4 years ago, we went out for some bids. And then the bids came back and it looked at Johnson & Block. And then I know there was a comparison done with some of the other municipalities, and it was just like, seems like Johnson & Block does a lot in the municipal government, sector per se. And we kind of look at it every year, but for the most part, Johnson & Block has been probably that auditor. I can't, I hate to say it because of dollars and cents, Tim, but probably because of, the cost, that kind of thing, so.
Coming from the banking background, it's just good to have a new set of eyes take a look at it from time to time. Just so, out of best practice, just so we have some...
Every 3 years, every 5 years, you thinking, or what are you?
I think at least every 5 years.
Okay.
At a bare minimum, every 5 years, I think it's worthwhile.
Okay.
Just to get a new set of eyes looking at it with experience in different municipalities, to get some suggestions on what we may be overlooking.
Yep. Nope, very good. I will make a note of that for the commission. Thank you.
So would you do a double audit in 1 year?
No.
Or do you do
No.
a separate audit and then go back because the other one's cheaper?
Not necessarily. Any accounting firm doesn't want to lose your business, and so there is a competitive nature to it, no doubt about it. Again, I think more out of due diligence, more out of best practice to have it looked at by some new eyes, not 2 audits,
Okay.
not 2 audits the same year, And not necessarily the same auditor in the second year, but just to have the auditors audit it, for lack of a better term.
Okay, thank you. And Tim, for some clarification, and I think it doesn't matter, Johnson and Block, no matter what it is, auditors themselves have changed, the firm has not. I don't know if that
Sure.
makes a difference to you or not.
Sure.
Just for some clarification
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah, it, again, I think,
Changing firms is what you're suggesting?
yes, exactly.
Correct, okay, yep, all right. Point well noted, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll move on to agenda item 4B. Review of 2024 budget as of June 30th. And with 50% of the fiscal year elapsed, the general fund is at 68% of its budgeted total. Total fund revenue, excuse me. And the budgeted total fund expenditures are 48%. And both are on target at this point for the fiscal year. Chief, do you have anything else on that?
Nothing that is on the exact, computer screen or, script, basically thinking that we're gonna spend a lot of money on any one item, that kind of stuff. As long as we, again, continue to move forward, nothing breaks that's major. And when I say major, if a truck engine would blow up, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, that kind of stuff is not budgeted for. The normal operating and general maintenance, we can handle that kind of stuff. And I guess we've been pretty savvy, commission in the last couple of years when we've had to do some work on our AC units around there, that we use some capital money from some of our station repairs to make that happen. So, 10 grand and an air conditioner or something of that nature, air handler to fix some stuff. We're okay for that kind of stuff. It's the big, large ticket items that would not be part of an operating budget, so. But otherwise, we should be fine. Lisa, was there anything that, from the finance department, and you're looking over the books every month for the fire district, anything that you see that you would have any concerns of?
I don't see anything that's concerning. Just make a note, though, that in the revenue section, the revenue has not been recorded for the month of June yet. The charges for the month of June.
And again, that's just where the way the revenues come in with EMS, all that stuff is back probably 75, 90 days sometimes, so there's always a lag of actual revenues to when they come in, so.
And we went to a different vendor, so we've been having a hard time getting in there to get our reports too, so. But John was working with him, I know, again today, so hopefully he was able to access.
Vendor with accounting software.
The EMS MCP,
Yeah.
because it changed from LifeQuest.
So we're better than 68% of revenue budget.
Yes, we would be a little bit better. It's just, that's the only revenue source that's missing for the month of June.
So, is the revenue generally front-loaded of the year then? That far ahead on revenue at this
No,
point?
no, it's recorded by month based on the charges that are generated.
Because you're at 68%, you're at 50% of the budget of the year.
Oh,
Some of the revenue comes in though from the municipal payments that the towns are, and the village
So
are
it is
making.
front, still a lot of them are collected
A lot of it is,
early
yeah,
in the
it's
year.
only a
And
portion.
governmental.
All right.
No, that's a good question, Tom, and again, we always try to let people know that, so that basically, with the contract portion of it, 70% is billed within the first couple of weeks of the year, and that goes out. And then the other 30% was billed probably just within the last
couple
30
weeks
days,
ago,
maybe,
yeah.
for the contract portion, and then the
capital
the
portion has
capitals
been.
was sent out on the front
Yep,
side of it, correct?
100%. I thought, I'm sorry, Tom, I
Yeah, those all-
misunderstood you. I
yeah,
thought you were
those all
asking only the EMS charge revenue.
Okay.
I thought that's what you're asking about.
All good questions.
It looks like each of the municipalities is at 70%.
Right, the 30% ones just went out.
Operating and 100 on their
Yep.
capital, so that's why we're ahead.
That'll all equal out by the end of the year.
Okay.
Like I've told Jason a couple times, and we might be ahead in like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's December, it'll all equal out, just stay tuned, so, but thank you. Yeah, all is normal.
questions about 2024 as of June 30th? Hearing none, we will move on to 4C, review draft of the 2025 district budget and capital improvement plan. And I believe Chief Winsmeyer and Martin have prepared a
Yep,
presentation.
we've had Martin and I have been spending a lot of time together, getting to know Martin more and more all the time, and his skill sets and all the above, so he's got some good documents that we put together here and all that kind of thing. On the front side of this, before we go through this part of it, I'm going to just make a couple general comments. I'm going to give you some high scale or high level thoughts and some descriptions and some different things. So first and foremost, in the 2025 budget, we probably started it with the commission probably back in April, maybe May, with some first drafts and some laying some things out and making some decisions and all that kind of thing. The biggest part of the 2025 budget is salaries, benefits, having personnel, being able to staff our operation. And as you look at these dollars and cents for the 2025 budget, that's where a lot of it is. You're talking probably around 30% or just about that dollars. For years, and the 52-200, 153 category, which is the old volunteer reimbursement group that pays our part-time people, has been, if you look at any of that category for many, many years, as Phil and many others can contest, is that been behind by probably $75,000 to $100,000 for many, many years. And by design, this group and the commission, we've always been putting some money towards that and trying to move things along. Again, I'll give a little history. Sometimes people don't like to hear history, but a little history is when I came here in 16, our part-time people were paid like $7.25 an hour. I know Carlene's not here tonight, but one of the directives, I know that a lot of folks is just like always say, hey, we try to get our firemen and women up to a more, I would say, livable wage, or whatever the competitors are paying at the market stores or wherever it might be in Oregon. Here or there, we've heard that. We've heard that a long time, and we've been working on it. Very small increments, as Lisa and Phil and other board members have been working on it. We continue to do that. So in this 2025 budget, we've got $100,000 going towards that, trying again to assist that. And where do we start our people today? On our part-time people that come in with no certification, that kind of stuff, just right around $10 an hour is where they are currently. And then we're paying our part-time paramedics $21 an hour. So if you start looking at some of these dollars and cents and how we staff and augment our full-time staff and all the other kind of stuff, that's where the dollars and cents is. The other part of that is we did settle our contract with our organized folks. We now have a 4-year contract with them, again, going through 26, paying our medics, and our medics across the board basically got about 5% a year. You think about 5% a year, 4 years, you can do the math. I think you know how numbers start to add up in budgets and all that kind of stuff. But it's compatible wages, and it's what is happening across not only Dane County, but the state of Wisconsin and the industry of the Fire-EMS. One of those things, we are still behind when we look at this, and the board knows this, commission knows that when I say the board, we have done, good studies, good looking cross sections of our equal comps, that we're $3 or $4 an hour behind with some of our medic pay compared to what's happening, just down the road at some of our other medic services. Here nor there, we basically, when I say we, myself and the commission, has basically went through a lot of this stuff, and we looked at where we are and what things happen if we are not competitive in keeping people, our men and women here, to be able to do the services that we need. Our call volume continues to go up, and as you've heard me say before, for those that have been around me, is basically our second ambulance calls, we try to capture as many of them as possible, and we've done a good job of that. Phil, you think you saw it, you mentioned it to me, and our commission members have seen it. We, in the past, have always, I don't want to say pushed it to our neighbors, but we weren't in a staffing position to be able to handle that. By some design and the way we staff now, more often than not, we can handle the second ambulance call and that kind of thing. But it takes money and dollars and training to bring these people in. The second part of that, as you all know, and I've been to, I think, all of your annual meetings, last year, and also the village board meeting, coming and talking basically about our turnover. Amanda, Lynn, you've heard it before from me, every year. It's very fortunate that our men and women train a lot of people, cadets and different folks. 3 to 5 years, they might be with us, they're gonna get a full-time firefighter medic job someplace else, and they're gone. Over the last years, that number is someplace between 6 and 9 people, and it's great for our group, but it's terrible for the veterans and the people in trying to sustain them. So one of the things in 2025 where I'm going back to this overview highlight is basically 100,000 is in there to hire another full-time person in there in our staffing plan that we had placed in a couple of years ago. Basically making sure that we hire back what we would call our Kelly days. It's a fixed schedule, it's a Wednesday and a Sunday, 24-hour shifts. As much as, I'm going to spin this a little bit, as much as I was not real happy with Martin a couple weeks ago, he asked if I would help with an exercise that the Village of Oregon is basically working on, that referendum. And he asked for a lot of different information and putting a bunch of comps together. And one of the things that I got out of it, I probably have 25, maybe 30 hours in the documents that we put together and going through our comps and everything else. But our per capita, and our per capita right now is like about 3.2, so about 3.2 fire EMS personnel per 1,000 in our district is what we're at in Oregon, where our comparables are anywhere from about 4.7 on up to almost 7. So now, so there's some room there, but our staffing plan shows that, all that kind of stuff. Keep in mind, the men and women that we bring on board full-time, they don't work a 2080 job, they work at 2,496 hours a year, and that job with benefits and salary and everything else is about $100,000 per person, all that kind of stuff. On the capital side, we did a very good, thorough process. Next year in the 2025 budget, we are looking at purchasing an ambulance. About 7 years ago, we purchased one when Phil was on board and Jeff again. We did not have capital plans, we didn't have a lot of things in place, and we had old equipment and a lot of repair. With that repair, our vehicles at the end of life was basically worth almost zero. They were worn out, and you were lucky to get a few $1,000s through surplus and that kind of stuff. And our repairs were a lot, where we were buying trannies and fixing different things, all that kind of thing. I suggested to the board back in 16 or 17 when Phil was on there and some others, basically putting in a capital plan where we start with our ambulances, with our transports, and you think about our transports to Madison, which is basically, what, 45 minutes or an hour away, basically, to Madison, and the mileage back and forth, and we do about 4.5 or 5 calls a day today. You think about the miles on these rigs, it doesn't take long, you got 100,000 miles on them. We bought warranties on them back when we did it. It was on 7-year warranties, 0 deductibles, took care of all of our repairs, controlled our cost. If you look at our cost and our maintenance and that part of it, we did a real good job of doing so. Here or there, those ambulances that we bought already back 7 years ago are now basically up for, one of them's up for replacement. We looked at green initiative ambulances. We were open to that. I had the committee take a look at it and all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, I made a decision that I did not think we could afford it. Green ambulance came back that basically was $772,000 or $73,000 for one ambulance, versus a diesel fossil fuel that we have proposed in this budget, basically replacing for about $396, I think it is, or $376, maybe it is, or $375, excuse me. One of those kind of things. So at the end of the day, we're going to get something for our other ambulance. We got that rolled back into some of the numbers and that kind of thing. So again, it works out to the benefit of the district and that kind of stuff. Again, the biggest thing that's in the 2025 budget is men and women and benefits and cost that's associated with that. The rest of it is, I hate to say loose change, but the majority of it's right there. Any board members, commission members, anything that I'm missing through the process that we went? Anything to add?
Just that I think it's important to recognize that the staff not only performs its normal duties, but and maybe these are considered normal duties at this point, but they do quite a bit of work, turning wrenches, working on the equipment, the apparatus, the vehicles, it saves the district quite a bit of money when they work on the vehicles themselves. So it's important to recognize that they are committed to doing that, and it really does help with the expenses situation.
To piggyback on that, just a couple other things that I want to say. Gene's not here tonight, but Gene puts a lot of time in turning some wrenches, doing some odds and ends. Gene's been around here a long time, and I wish he would have come tonight, but just in general, Gene will have 50 years on this fire department as the old volunteer group, now as a part-time person, basically, have done his time and all that kind of stuff, but he has, you know, I would only hope that some of our younger men and women in the service would follow his footsteps and be around in their communities to help and give at a time of need for 50 years of their lives or any of our lives, that kind of thing. Second and foremost, Martin and Jeff from Public Works here, basically has worked out in a good agreement with us that we're using the village's mechanic to turn some wrenches on some things also to help us with projects that we can't do. So we've got, you know, we take care of the village employees back, their wages and that kind of stuff. Any materials we buy, either we buy them on the fire district or the village, and then we pay the village back for that kind of stuff. So we have a good partnership there that we have aligned up here the last couple of years to control those costs. And only when and if it's outside of the realm of the village operations that we would have to take something someplace that we would use an outside firm. There is a chance here or there, that kind of thing, or a specialty thing that might happen. The other part that I do want to say, going back to the 2024 our current capital outlay, and just one of the things there, this group, and again, over the years, we have been, I guess I'll go back to 2016, Phil, when you sat down with me and you worked with me, you hired me basically as a consultant when I first came in, that kind of thing. We talked about different things, but what I'm going back to is that this fire district has bought a few used apparatus now. This last year, this 2024 budget, we ended up buying that used squad that came from basically down the southern part of the country. Never have seen snow or winter yet. It will see it, whatever, December or maybe February this or whenever winter decides to show up in the Midwest now, this coming year. But we bought a real good truck with low mileage, 5,000 miles on it. I think we had 400,000 in it, as I recall, Lisa, for the capital this year on that squad. When we're all said and done, that truck, if we would have bought that new, as we talked about that last year, would have been over $800,000 quite easily. There again, you got to have the men and women in Gene and a few others basically put the word out and basically checked all of the different vendors throughout the country to make that happen. Those things do work out, and that'll be, again, a 20-year truck that'll work out just fine when we get that on the road here yet this fall, that kind of thing. Here nor there, those are the wins that I figured that this operation needed to do with our commission and everything else, because again, our dollars and cents, we know we need. I always say, what can we agree upon and what can we all walk away from the table? There's two things that I can tell you that doesn't matter if it's a township or the village that we all agree upon. And that's making sure that we have men and women available for a fire and EMS call 24/7, 365 days. Doesn't matter which one of you it is. I know you all agree with that because most of you have told me that. And the second part of that is it varies as far as the cost on of it and that kind of stuff. Do it. We want to make sure that that happens and all that kind of stuff. And then taking care of our men and women. We know that those are the things that we all agree on. All the rest of the stuff sometimes might be different and go off in some other tantrums and everything else, but again, second ambulance calls, capturing them and being able to take care of fire EMS wherever we are and that kind of thing. And more often than not now we're getting to the point where we might be even at 3 calls sometimes and that kind of stuff, and at that point we are depleted. We're waiting for outside resources to come in. But it is one of those things that it just happens as you have growth and you continue to see the numbers grow, that kind of thing. So I think that's a pretty good snapshot of the 2025 budget, and I don't know if you want to take questions, if you want to go through our whole presentation here that we have, and then you can ask some questions and see what everybody thinks and go from there.
I've had a chance to go through the presentation already, and it's very good, very informative. It does get a little complicated here and there.
I was hoping Jennifer was gonna be here tonight, because for the last 3 or 4 years, Jennifer has been telling Lisa and I that she really would like to see the fire district here in Oregon start levying back some of the levy limits and make the cap, getting ourselves into those numbers. And in previous years, we still choose not to do that. So we took that, we listened to heart, and we kind of worked and designed things accordingly. With that, we're using some fund balance and some of this $1 million or more to try, I hate to use the word buy it down, but to soften some of that, large jump for the townships or for the village or anyone else, and try to make it salvageable. And at the same time, take care of all of the other obligations and all of the other commitments that we basically think that we can handle, keeping our employees here and all that kind of stuff with this competitive wage and all the other kind of things that we kind of would like to work towards. So with that, I am going to Rutland.
I just talked to Jennifer this afternoon. And yes, she is very concerned about this, and something on this slide catches my attention. What is the property tax levy limit exception?
Yep, and Martin's gonna go over that, so we're gonna go over all that whole presentation, and I'll be honest with you, none of you got that. There was only like 3 of us that got that presentation. It was put up together by Martin, myself, and basically Jeff oversaw or seen some of it. So that's, no one else, to my knowledge, has that, correct, Martin?
No.
Yeah. So we're gonna go over that, we're gonna have a little discussion, and then ask questions away, and between one of the 3 of us, we should be able to hopefully answer you.
Right, as they go along, folks, if you have any questions while we're going through the presentation, it's important to get some clarity. Have any questions that you have, maybe explain it a different way, so we all understand what the process is here,
Can
okay?
I throw a quick question out there then?
Sure.
So, on our equipment purchases, we've got 400,000 in 2024 and 375 in 2025.
Correct.
And those are in our operating budget. So those are coming out of that operating budget and not separate in the capital.
That's going to be yet to be determined. So there are kind of two different documents that are kind of running a little bit parallel. And the 2 different documents is a version of stuff that Lisa and I put together. We got the board to kind of agree to these numbers and all that kind of stuff. And then there's this other version with the levy limits and all that kind of stuff that I don't think our sheets really match that levy limit part of it. With that 100,000 in that the board asked to put in for that part of it at the last commission meeting, that kind of thing. So let's go through that so you get a real good idea and make sure that everybody kind of understands it and likes the direction that we're going. And then again, we don't know things that Martin will tell, and I'm taking highlights away from this, but basically at the end, we don't know what the CPI is going to be from the state plus the 2%. We don't know what that is going to be, and then we can calculate accordingly. And the stuff that we're talking about tonight, I talked to our CPA, which is Johnson and Block, and Tara Bass, basically the CPA auditor that basically did the bookwork for the district here. We look at our fund balances and all that kind of stuff. We have a fund balance policy that says we should have someplace between 20 and 30% of our operating in our fund balance to be able to handle our operating expenses should something go wrong and all those kind of things. We kind of took a snapshot. Martin has a picture of that, kind of seeing where we can go with that percentage. So we've got some things, again, how we can all do this. So if we can, Kathy, if you're good, and Arlen, if we go through the presentation with Martin, and then we go from there.
We'll go from there.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm probably going to talk for quite a while, so I apologize. But as I mentioned, there's quite a lot to this. I think on its surface, this exception that we'll talk about is generally pretty uncomplicated once you learn it. But when it interacts with the budget and some of the other things that we want to do with staffing and funding, there's a lot of layers to the onion here. So it'll take a little bit to peel them all back. So I guess, first of all, just to start off, I mean, we did introductions, but if you want to know a little bit about me, I'm on the left there, but more importantly, I think on the right, as Chief mentioned, I think it's been talked about in the past, sparingly about using this exception, but this year it got pushed to the forefront, definitely by the village. earlier this year, we were looking at projections for our 2025 budget and beyond, and I think probably like many of the communities here and elsewhere, there's a lot of challenges for our operating budgets. It seems to be getting harder every year. And so there was a set of objectives that our village board set out to explore throughout the remainder of this year. Obviously, a referendum is something that we're exploring that's been in the news. But this exception for joint fire and EMS districts is another one of the tools that the village board wanted to explore. So myself, Elisa, and Phil, our village president, met with Glenn and Chief back in May and in June, and we said, this is sort of our situation, and here's what we're thinking. What do you think about it? Where's the district at with its budget this year? Once that came together, we took a look at it, and not only do we think we can use it, but we actually think it can be used to do some of these things that Chief's been talking about for several years at these meetings, which is wages and staff. So there's maybe a good synergy here of a couple things going on. So when we talked about it, we talked about making sure that we do a nice presentation and as I said, kind of peel back all these layers to what's going on here. So we'll just start out really broad, 30,000 foot view, and then we'll get down into numbers specific to even every community here. So I don't think there's anything on this slide that's surprising or new to anybody, but of course we have levy limit laws here in the state. We've all experienced them. Of course, property taxes is our bread and butter revenue for local government. And of course, it's a pretty restrictive limit, whether you're a community that's not growing or a community that's growing pretty fast. It's two sides of the same coin. So we've been in that environment for about the last 20 years. So we know that that's out there, but of course there are exceptions to the levy limit. There's a lot of them out there that are very circumstantial. Pretty much most communities can't use most of these things most years. Probably the most common one is debt service payments. You can exempt debt service payments. You can raise your levy to cover those debt service payments up to your constitutional debt limit. So you can't raise your levy for operating, but you can sure take out a lot of debt and pay for it through your property taxes if you want to. There's a couple other things out there that are a little bit more common, intergovernmental agreements, transferring some services, annexations, but of course, in most of those circumstances, somebody's gaining levy and somebody's usually having to take a negative adjustment on their levy. So then there's this exception for joint fire districts and joint EMS districts that also exists out there. So in front of you, I handed out before the meeting, there's this little packet of materials. So this is just some reference materials. You can read at your leisure time, but the actual statutory language for the exception is the top sheet. And then on the next couple of sheets is a frequently asked questions that's published by the Wisconsin Department of Revenue, just answering some questions about some things that you might have some questions about, obviously. So, at its most basic, local governments using this exception, they can exceed their levy limit to cover charges that are assessed by a joint fire or a joint EMS district if the property tax levy, if you need more property tax levy beyond your existing limit to cover those charges. So, and I'll get a little bit more into it, but there's two requirements to meet this exception. The first one here is really the most consequential one. The total assessed charges to the municipalities from the joint fire and EMS district cannot exceed the prior year's total assessed charges by a factor of CPI plus 2%. So total assessed charges means whatever funds all of our municipalities in total are asked to contribute to the district for that year. So that change from year to year needs to stay within this factor of CPI plus 2%, and I'll get more into it in just a second. And then the second requirement is all of our municipalities have to adopt a resolution approving in favor of using this exception. And the nice thing with this is that even if we all approve it, you don't actually have to use it if you don't want to. And then the last thing I'll add, and this is a little bit of inside baseball when you start to really think about using this exception, it is a base building. So if you take this exception, whatever is accepted, that amount above your limit for this purpose, rolls into your levy, and then it stays there permanently. It doesn't come out the next year, it's there. It builds your base for the next year and moving forward. So I'll explain a little bit more on it, and I'll talk numbers too, so you can actually see it. But just as an aside, you may be thinking, why does this even exist? What is this? So this was one of the first exceptions that was actually put into the levy law in 2006. So the levy limit law was put in place 20 years ago in 2005. This came just a year later, and I'm sure it was done for a couple of reasons. One, obviously Fire-EMS, important service, public service that we provide, making sure that we have some extra options for raising revenue is a good thing. The state legislature decided that was a good thing. This exception definitely encourages consolidation and cooperation, because this exception is not available to just a municipally owned fire or EMS department. So if the village had its own fire department, there's no equivalent exception. So this is only available to communities who are in these types of arrangements. It does encourage expenditure restraint because there is a cap too. So the state has said, we'll allow you to take more, but we're still going to cap it at CPI plus 2%. So if you stay within that, you can take a little bit more money, but if you go over it, we're not going to give you anything. You can't even go over your limit at that point. So there is a little bit of control there still. And then I think certainly too, with the joint and the district model, if we all had our own fire departments, we could decide how we wanted to set our budgets and operate them. But when we come together, you lose some control, and maybe some things, some years you don't like, but we know that being in these arrangements has some really good positives too. So this exception gives a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of grace in, okay, maybe I don't like something in this budget this year, but there's an exception that gives us a little wiggle room, we can take a little more taxes on it, and kind of smooths the water a little bit. So, two things I want to cover on the exception itself. So you might be thinking joint EMS district, joint fire department. Those are defined things in statute. So most importantly, for both of these definitions, a combination of two or more cities, villages, and towns organized under 660301, the state statute. You might think, are we organized under that? It's actually referenced right in the title of our agreement together. So you can see on the right side here, we have an agreement. This is our agreement that creates this district for providing fire service and EMS service, and it's done pursuant to 660301. So there you go. So going back to total assessed charges, so this is really the key variable in meeting this exception. So the most important thing in meeting the exception is this number right here, this 1,569,118. So that is the total number that was assessed to all of us. And then that number was proportioned out based upon our agreement and all the variables that are in the agreement. That's what they're looking at. They're looking at that total bottom line number that was assessed to all of us. Not the total budget, just the number that was assessed to all of us. And then that number from this year to the following year is the number that can't go above that factor, that's CPI plus 2%. So you can see in right out here that this year we had 1.5 million that was assessed to us in 2024. 2025 in the budget that's been presented, it's 1.6. The The difference is just $61,000. And that's just a hair under 4%. So meeting that CPI plus 2%, as Chief said, we don't know what the CPI is yet. That's published by Department of Revenue in September. But we're working off an estimate. We're estimating 3%. And so we add 3 to 2, get 5. So in this, what we're looking at with our budget, we assume that we could meet this threshold and would qualify for the exception. So that's the levy limit exception. So that's how that works. So now, I guess going back to the onion metaphor, so the next layer of this is the actual budget itself. So Chief just described everything here that's on this slide. Increased wages, a new position. As he said, the district's done a great job with its capital planning. We've known about the dollar amounts for capital purchases. The district did, the commission just designated $100,000 for some possible facility planning work. There's a large facility project targeted in 2027. So, you know, in a normal year, it would probably be really hard to do all of this, looking at our levy limits and things like that. But the exception provides an ability for us to at least consider it. And the other element of it is, as Chief alluded to, is the use of some district fund balance to make it happen. So, just really briefly on fund balance. So fund balance, we all have in our organizations. I'm sure we're all familiar with them, but just to go over it briefly. So this is basically your reserves, your rainy day fund. The district has these reserves. It's just funds that accumulate over time, unspent funds, budget surpluses. It's your savings account. It's good to have a minimum level, as Chief mentioned. You may have emergencies. Budget overages happen, you may be saving for something specifically. We just had kind of a conversation about when revenues come in and when expenses happen. A lot of organizations rely on very large amounts of specific revenues, and especially in smaller organizations. You have to make payroll and do things throughout the year, but a huge chunk of your revenue doesn't come in until May or June. It's good to have a fund balance because you have that cash in the bank that you can use. So, you know, typically you may think, well, more money is better. The more we accumulate, the better. But it can also create problems. And one of those problems is just a perception, a public perception problem, where if you're having these huge budget surpluses every year, year after year. I worked in a community previously that this was happening. People started to ask questions like, why do you have all this money that you're accumulating? Why are you even taxing me for this? So that can be a problem. If you're, you know, the second one here is a little more specific, but if you are taking out debt and maybe you decide after you've taken out that debt, the cash is sitting in your fund balance, you decide, well, maybe we're going to wait a year or 2 years to buy whatever this thing we were going to buy, what this debt was. Or maybe we've figured out that we're actually going to spend a lot less than we thought we were going to. So now you have a bunch of money sitting in your fund balance that you've got from debt, and you may be incurring some unnecessary interest expense. And then this last one is important too, and there's some pretty high-profile cases in municipal case law over the last 80 years that generally courts have held that statutes prohibit the accumulation of unappropriated surpluses for local governments. So it's really only okay to have money in your fund balance for 2 reasons. Reasonable amounts on hand to meet cash flow needs, and if you're saving for a specific purpose. You know, if you're going to buy a fire truck, you have to set aside some money and you're saving for that fire truck. That's okay. And so that's why having a minimum fund balance policy, which the district has, is really important to make sure that we're staying consistent with some of these requirements. And So as Chief mentioned, the minimum fund balance for the district is to maintain between 20 and 30% of the budgeted operating fund in unassigned funds. So, as was mentioned, there's $1.1 million that the fire district has in fund balance. And that's how it's broken down right now. This is the end of 2023, the actual audit. And there's different types of fund balance. So those top two, those non-spendable and restricted amounts, they're exactly what they sound like. You can't spend them or they're restricted for some purpose. And usually that's because some sort of external thing has put some requirement on it, whether it's the state or maybe you have a grant that you can only spend that money on that very specific thing. And then those couple things in green, assigned and unassigned, are things where the district has discretion. So the district controls those funds and can use those funds how it sees fit, generally. So as you can see, we have $200,000 that's been assigned for future capital. So again, setting aside money for some kind of purpose. And we have $306,000 that's accumulated from 2% fire dues, and I'll talk on that briefly in just a second. And then we have this unassigned amount, which is just money that's accumulated that is for no particular purpose. That's almost $600,000. So just, I'll talk about 2% dues because we're not going to talk about them after this. But so in the handout that I gave, there's a couple of documents about what 2% dues are and how you can use them. But basically, they're funds that all of our communities actually receive first from the state. We're required to pass them on to the fire district, and the fire district can only use them for certain purposes. Some of those purposes are for capital, so you can see the list here, fire protection equipment, but you can also use them for some operating stuff, like inspection services, education services, training, that sort of thing. So when we look at that $306,000 assigned fund, the district can use it how it wants, but there are still some requirements within how they can use that. And based on the stuff that the district wants to do in 2025, I'd say generally those funds, other than if they're going to be used for some operating budget stuff, they're not going to be part of this equation. So, in looking at the fund balance, and I apologize if you can't see this well too far out there, but as I mentioned, there's the minimum fund balance for the district is between 20 and 30% of its budgeted operating fund. So in 2024, the total budget expenditures was $2.4 million, but we're only calculating the fund balance based upon operating, so we need to remove some of the capital expenses that are in the budget. And so the total budgeted operating fund is $1.8 million this year. So 20% of that, obviously, is $378. 30% is $567. So we have an unassigned fund balance of $595. So we're sitting at 31.45% of that calculation. So we're just a little bit above our fund balance policy maximum. So there's a little bit of excess there, about $27,000. And then we also have that $200,000 that's been designated for future capital. So we have $227,000 that is for capital or is above our own minimum or our own maximum policies. And then between the 20 and 30%, there is almost $200,000 in there as well. So even if we spent $416,791 in fund balance, we would still be meeting our minimum fund balance policy technically. So there is some capacity there that could be used to do something with. So in looking at that, and as I mentioned, talking with Chief and seeing what their goals are for their budget this year, so there's an ability to take these two things, this available fund balance, this levy limit exception, and to do a lot of things with that we can do to meet some of the goals that the district has. So we can use that fund balance to lower the needed contributions for capital. So we know that there's a capital request for 2025. It's about close to 400,000. Instead of asking for more from us, we can spend down some of that, contribute some of that fund balance. And of course, you want to only spend fund balance on one-time things because you don't know if it's going to come back, right? You don't want to spend it on chief's salary because it could be gone the next year, and then how are we going to pay chief? So we want to make sure that we just spend that money on one-time capital costs. So this is the capital budget, and I know I mentioned the facility planning costs, and I'll get to that too. But so this was the capital budget that was put forward. So it's $395 in total, $375 for the ambulance, $20,000 for building updates. So instead of asking for municipal contributions that total $395, instead the proposal in the budget is using $245,000 of the district's fund balance and then asking the municipalities to contribute $150,000. So that takes us back to this. So you can see that number reflected right here. So again, with the exception, what's important is, and what they're looking at, is the difference between these two numbers. And if that is becomes less than that, then we qualify. And so obviously you can see there's this significant jump in operating. Because we're using the contribution that was in capital last year and moving a lot of that over to operating to cover some of the wages and the new position that you spoke about. I think this slide just says exactly what I just said. So I'm going to keep going. Again, as I said, it increases the operating from pretty significantly, 33% increase, over $300,000. And that helps us achieve some of the things that she mentioned. So now we'll get into really nitty-gritty numbers here. So here's this total assessed charges to all of our municipalities, broken down by our communities. So this is the operating portion. So this year, this is what this looked like this year, what we contributed in operating. This is the allocation estimate of the total to each of our proportions. And this is what it looks like for 2025. You can see that there's some pretty significant increases there. But then on the capital side, you can see that those decreases. So this is what it looked like in 2024. You can see that 150 being divided out. You can see some of those, it's obviously dropping off for that side of things. So when you bring those two together, the actual total dollar amount contributions from the communities ends up being, another $35,000 from the village, another $9,000 from the town of Rutland. You won the lottery, I guess. Town of Dunn, another $30,000. So the next layer of the onion is, how do you make that contribution as a community? So at least on the village side, I obviously know how the village does it, but your communities may do it differently, and kind of put some scenarios in here that I can show. But so for the village, for the operating contribution, we use tax levy. So we contribute our tax levy for that portion. For the capital portion, we use debt. So we take out debt every year. We roll it into an obligation for all the stuff that we need debt for every year. And then we contribute that cash that we get from our debt to the district to pay for our contribution. So in using the levy limit exception, and you can go back to the handout that I have there, you can kind of see my meandering back and forth with the DOR on this and making sure that what I'm presenting here and what we're talking about is actually kosher with what the law is actually saying. And they say yes, and we'll get into that on the next slide, but under the scenario, if we were to use the levy limit exception, we can levy an additional $227,000 over our limit to match dollar for dollar this increase from year to year in the operating contribution that the village provides. So, and this is just lifted right from what's in your packet there. So this is from the DOR on this. So just kind of restating again. So for the levy limit calculation, to determine if the adjustment is applicable, you need to compare both operating and capital assessed charges in total. So again, total assessed charges, operating capital, from 2024 to 2025, for the comparison of the percent increase to CPI plus 2%. If that test is met, then you can look at the municipality's difference separated by operating and capital. The difference related to operating, assuming the CPI plus 2% was met, is what can be used as the line I adjustment. So line I adjustment refers to our levy limit worksheets that all of our communities have to fill out every year. So that adjustment is the exception. So for the village, we would be putting $227,525 on that. We could take that much more beyond our normal levy limit. So for each of your communities, again, I don't know how you pay for your contributions. So this is the town of Oregon. So if you do it like the village does, and you contribute the operating portion with levy, and you use debt for capital this year, and then you intended to do the same next year, the exception would potentially be $63,000 more that you could levy to meet that contribution request. If you just use property tax levy for everything, for the entire contribution you give to the district, it would be just a hair under $10,000 that you could use for the exception. If you currently levy, you're paying for the whole contribution for levy, but now you want to pay for the capital portion using debt, you actually would be saving $17,000 on your levy because your operating portion would be that much less. And then you would be using your cash from your debt to pay for the debt portion. And then you can exempt the debt payments to pay for that too. So there's an option there too. If you're using debt to pay for the capital and levy to pay for the operating, but now you want to go to just paying all of it on levy, you potentially could levy an additional $90,000 to do that. For Rutland, again, it's the same thing. If you're levying for operating, using debt for capital for this year, and you tend to do that the same thing next year, you could levy an additional $16,000 to meet your contribution amount. If you're using just tax levy for your entire contribution, that's going down. So you free up $22,000 in levy in your base anyways to use for something else. And then again, these two scenarios, if you're using levy now, but you want to convert the capital contribution to using debt, or if you are using debt for your capital contribution and you want to convert to all levy, you potentially levy an additional $24,000. Again, town of Dunn, same thing. If you're using levy for operating, debt for capital this year, and you intend to do so next year, potential exception is an additional $36,000 on your levy. If your entire contribution is coming from tax levy, be an additional $30,000. And then again, those two different scenarios that we talked about. So if you want to use the exception, so if we do intend to move forward with this, and you want to use it, obviously you can see my correspondence with the DOR. I would, however you want to do it, because I don't know how you guys can make your contributions, I would suggest reaching out to the DOR and just confirming that, okay, this is how we do it. Does this make sense, and can we do it? We certainly will qualify for it, but we just want to make sure that we do it all right, we connect all the dots there and do it all right. And I'm certainly happy to be an extra set of eyes for any of the communities. If you have a question, happy to do so. So, just a couple other things. We talked about facility planning expenses, so there's a major building project coming up that's been targeted in the district's capital plan since, for a while now, it's targeted for 2027. I think it was just at the last commission meeting here in July that the commission decided they'd like to designate up to $100,000 for some planning costs in 2025 related to that project. Space needs, what have you, maybe some preliminary design or something. So, okay, where does that come from, and what's the impact of that? So if we were to use fund balance, so we know that we have about $800,000 in unassigned fund balance and some of that assigned fund balance in future capital. We just talked about that we're going to contribute, that we're going to use $245,000 of our fund balance for the 2025 capital. If we add another $100,000 in there, this is what we're left with. And so where does that leave us at the end of 2025? If we do spend all that money, we're going to be just a hair below 22%. So we're still within our 20 to 30% range. This assumes that 2024 comes out completely even too. So if it ends up producing some surplus, you can add that on top of this number. Obviously, if it produces a deficit, that's a different conversation. But that's what this would look like. And then going back to that original chart for what 2023 fund balance looks like, you can see what 2025 would look like in that scenario. Spend up all that future capital, spend a little of the unassigned, we still have just a little bit under $800,000 fund balance. So again, Chief talked about increases to wages, additional staff member. We want to keep up with our capital purchases. Using these two tools, pulling on these two tools allows us to be able to do that when we probably otherwise wouldn't be able to do that. One thing I'll say too, is just thinking about the future, we haven't used the exception, I don't think, in the district previously. It's not always possible. It just isn't realistic some years, just because your capital costs really throw things out of balance with that. But you could, I mean, as all of our communities and the commission, we could be very strategic about how we use this. So for 2026, so if we project that out, so we know we have the capital plan from the district. They're expecting $280,000 in capital expenses in 2026. I just assumed in this projection a 3% increase in operating. So you can see the capital immediately kind of throws this whole thing off, right? So immediately we're just 14%, we're way over, and being even more conservative on CPI for 2026 here. So when you have those big fluctuations, especially in capital, it can really throw things off pretty quickly. So, and this is just a scenario, this isn't actually anything based on any of the plans that the district has, but you can see how, if you're really strategic about it, you have really big capital years, and everybody would almost certainly have to take out debt in this scenario to pay for capital. But you could have these really big capital years, low, kind of keeping operating flat-ish, and then follow that up with a year where you have no capital, and then you can dramatically increase your operating to do wages, to add staff. And you can see, even though we're adding over $400,000 in operating, a huge increase from 26 to 27 here, because we're getting rid of that capital for that year, we're never going to be even close to hitting that cap on the CPI plus 2%. So that's a little bit of like the inside kind of baseball here, where you could be really kind of strategic about, we're gonna do a bunch of capital this year, and then the following year, we're gonna be able to get a couple people, a couple new staffers for them, and we're gonna use this little exception, play this little game here to try to make that happen. So, a couple things for next steps, and then I'm happy to take questions or talk about anything else. So for this July meeting, there's obviously things, we're still working on the budget. A lot of times we don't have, although we do have health insurance now, somehow, just crazy.
Health insurance came in.
Health insurance is usually one of the last things, but we already have it. But there's other things that we get over the next couple months that we can refine the budget with. And then, of course, we don't actually know what the actual CPI factor is. We'll know that in September. I don't know if we've recalculated the percentages for the communities.
No.
Not
Yeah,
yet.
yeah.
No,
So
they
we
haven't
gotta calculate those portions out correctly. And then for that second part now, if we wanna move forward, and this is something that's desirable and we wanna do this, we obviously have to have those resolutions approved too, so between this meeting and the next meeting in September, we can certainly prepare those. We have the joint meeting September 25th, take a look at the final budget, and I think if everybody's agreeable, I think we're all here, we can approve those resolutions all at the same time, if we're going in that direction.
In September.
Yep.
In September. Questions for the team? Harlan?
Yes, we have a number of questions here. One, you've got what is the deadline for action with the Department of Revenue?
As far as what?
If you're going into the levy limit exemption?
So every year we have to file a levy limit worksheet, the DOR. So that's when we have to submit that work.
When is that?
December.
December, yeah. So it's after.
December?
Yep.
But we have, you're talking a resolution 2 months from now, the 25th of September, being a time when this group needs to be either saying we're on board or we're not on board.
Potentially, yep.
Okay. Is this, you've projected out roughly into the 25, 26. Is this something, I mean, we're going to be getting a lot of questions going in far into the future, and you have a very large expenditure projected in 27 and 28. Not on there yet.
Okay.
And we're not quite sure how that's going to fit in here. Your presentation here, are we going to be having a copy of this?
I can send it.
How do we get that? Because
I'll distribute it tomorrow.
there's a lot of numbers flying around here that we
Yep.
need.
Yep. Yeah, I can send it to everybody.
Jennifer is going to be extremely interested.
You know, I think Jennifer should be extremely interested, and I think everybody sitting around the table, and this is one of the things that, as you can obviously see, there's been a lot of work, and a lot of the conversations that Carl and I've heard from all of this group over the years is something that I took back to, I'm going to say the team, basically Martin and Lisa, and then Phil sat in on a couple of meetings, and we looked at this really very closely, and I'm personally a very conservative person. I like to make sure that we have money in our accounts, we be able to make these things happen, everything else, and you look at this stuff, and, you know, we could project these things, and I'm very shy sometimes to be too aggressive because, you know, all the planning in the world and all the screens and all the other kind of stuff, and then there's things that happen that throw these projections off and everything else. Exactly. So then you go back to your fund balances of 20, 30% and all this other kind of thing. I am convinced the more that we have been working on this and doing this and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, one of the things that Martin said tonight, and you none of the group, maybe other than, who would have been on the Town of Oregon board at the time, I guess maybe probably none of this board, in 2022, this is all new group since 22. Any of you guys on in 22? So in 22, we went through it and we updated that contract with this group. And that contract was a 1995 version that I had originally and filled. But there was about 4 or 5 different generations of boards. We did it about over COVID in about 18 months or so that we did it. We went through a lot of different things, and one of the things that happened in the past, Arlen and others, is like always was the true-up days. And if you remember the true-up days, and what that meant is that $175,000 that we had lucky this year and whatever we had last year, those monies would go back to the municipalities. And by design, because this organization, prior to me, Phil, and Jeff, you guys are gonna have to help me, at some point, 2010 or whatever, ran into some hard times, and some dollars and cents had to be put on the table to make it, flowable and make it operable. I think that from those days, we've learned that we need to keep these fund balances part of the district and be able to plan for some of this stuff and have a little option, a little reserve. So, again, I'm cautious and all the above, but then at the same time, you read and you look at all these, the objection of a part of making this happen for a fire district. I think this is something where the municipality's got to take advantage of it to keep their operations locally sustainable and fundable, all that kind of stuff. Because ultimately, depending on how everyone does it, it may help you in your overall budgets in your townships or municipalities, per se.
We have to look at that.
100%, I get
And
that.
this is going to be a rather short time frame to be
Yep,
truly analyzing this.
yep.
So the more information you
Totally
get,
understand.
the better.
And at
faster.
the end of the day, again, like Martin said, some could do it and some could opt out to go the other way. But there again, as you're taking these advantages of being in a district, you really have to analyze it on your local level. I'll just leave it at that.
Is this something that all municipalities have to be participating?
Again, not, in this particular one here, from my understanding, no. I mean, we could vote that anybody that wanted to do it, you could do it, and then you could have the exemptions. If the town of Dunn wanted to opt out, Kathy, you could go your own direction, as I understand it.
If I can clarify that, each would need to adopt a resolution, and that would have to be unanimous. But you do not have to take the levy limit exception for your municipality. So the district has to adopt this plan, but you can choose not to
Locally.
in your particular
Use
town.
the exception, make it happen.
Okay, so again, something to check with the Department of Revenue to make
Well,
sure.
Yep, you confirm, trust but verify.
Amanda, you have a question, or Lynn?
A quick question about that resolution. Is the resolution forevermore? Is that something that we have to continue to renew our unanimous consent to?
It's just for this current budget year.
1 year.
It's 1 year
Okay.
at a time.
Yep.
So every year, we would need to come back and make sure that we're all at least interested in the resolution.
Yeah,
And-
if we qualify, if we meet the change factor, and then if it's something that we wanted, everybody wants to do, so there's a political element to it, so if those two things are met, then we would have to approve it every year,
Okay.
if it's possible.
Okay.
Amanda?
Follow-up to that, so the resolution is just saying that as a fire district, all the municipalities agree that they might take advantage of this.
Yep, that they're,
Is that kind of what I'm understanding, like,
yep,
okay,
yep.
all right.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
I had a question on the numbers. So, first of all, I think if we have the ability to take an exception to the levy limit worksheet, it makes a lot of sense to make sure we all have that tool in our toolkit, because there aren't a lot of exceptions to the levy limits, and it's just of the district and contributes most of the funding, 66% of the funding. Town of Dunn is about 10% of the district, and so we're contributing about 10% of the funding. But in the calculation showing the change, the town of Dunn would contribute an extra 30,000 and the village 35, or am I misunderstanding something there?
Yes, so, let's see here.
I'd like to be at negative 22.
I can double check that formula in there, Kathy.
Yeah,
There might be something there.
we were just kind of expected to come out pretty close to our percentage shares that we share in the cost, so.
Yep.
Might have just put in a,
Yeah, it might just be a little anomaly in there.
The lottery just lost.
Yeah, might have to share it with us.
It's a lot.
Any decimal point was moved or something.
yeah, and I would just say in general, like, don't think these numbers are set in stone. I mean, obviously, like I said, the budget will change. We're still, there'll be some numbers that will change. The portions will change because we need to get.
Percentages will change.
Percentage will change. So, and then we'll make sure our math is good too, obviously. So, yeah, good. Thanks for pointing that out, Kathy.
Good catch.
A question of multiple, does this raise havoc with us that have multiple fire districts? We're part of Brooklyn and Belleville districts. Rutland, you have Stoughton as well as Oregon. You just Oregon or Fitchburg?
We have three.
Three.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Each
Is that going to raise havoc?
No havoc.
No, each is independent, and from the DNR standpoint, it's an independent.
And those other districts are not joint districts, and so they're not entitled to get this exception. So if we get an increase from the City of Stoughton Fire-EMS district, or in our case, the Village of McFarland, those are not joint districts that are organized under the statute that would allow the exception. So this is the only district that we participate in where we would have the option.
And to answer your question on that, Arlen, you would have Belleville and Brooklyn, both of those would, if they did the same thing that we would be doing here, you could use those. If they kept it in the limits, you could also use that levy there on those other districts, because they are underneath the same chapter, that 66, that the Oregon one is under.
Isn't Brooklyn doing this now? Yes, Brooklyn's already.
Brooklyn already is, so?
Yes.
Okay. And is the town of Rutland utilizing this to their advantage now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
You are using that.
Correct. So I want to thank Martin for all the work you've done and for the village for the time that you put your employees in to help do this. I mean, this is amazing. It's very helpful. Thank you, Martin.
Absolutely. I think I figured it out. We switched Rutland's and Dunn's numbers here.
Gee.
I knew that.
Coming.
There was too good to be true. There was too good to be true. Like there's a hair somewhere. I'm not even gonna think about it.
You got to cash the check.
Yeah, really.
It's just shifting. Yeah. Selecting fingers.
Yeah.
Talking to another.
Yeah.
So here's those.
These are taxes.
That's the question.
Well,
Yeah. I'll update those when I send the presentation to you guys.
But
That
the
was
questions coming
by
in.
how much will that?
And Mark, was that the email string, you and the DOR
Yeah,
as part of that documentation?
yeah.
That helped me understand
Oh, good.
your thought process going into this.
Good.
So you might want to include that with,
Yeah.
if you'd like.
He's pretty patient with me.
Yeah.
And as I say, to be fair, this isn't free money. I we're still gonna be paying more.
That's
100%.
absolutely right. And that's
100%.
a good and make this point.
Numbers are moving and, yeah, they're not going down. I hate to say that, but just not going down.
You're asking, you're levying more, so you're asking for more taxes for your residents, right?
Can I ask a question on the facility study planning? So will that be designs? I mean, have the conversations moved so far as to be ready for drawings? Or?
I think we can cover that one in that next item.
Oh, okay.
Next,
Sorry.
hang on a second, thanks. Any questions on that? So I guess probably just from my perspective, is there, I mean, this is where we are currently, and we're gonna continue to move with that. We'll update all the numbers and kind of bring everything back together, looking for quorums from all of our municipal partners to be at that 25th of September meeting, I believe it is, and go that direction. We should have everything filled out. We should have resolutions. We should have everything to go that way. And if, what else I want to say, Mark? Help me.
You got it.
So,
Nailed it.
that's kind of the direction that we're going, or we'd like to go. So I guess, you know, if not, we need to know.
It's a short time frame.
What's that?
It's a short time frame.
Oh, it's definitely a short time frame. And obviously, we've been working on it for a considerable amount of time already. I mean, on this end of it. I understand you got your local areas where you gotta look at things. I get that. So. And I think, yeah, everybody's available for questions also.
Check out the schedule.
Nope, understandable. Anything else? Thank you very much, Mark. You're cheap. Thanks. And again, I would like to thank Mark, Lisa, Phil, and the group that's been working on this for a considerable amount of time, because I know there's a lot of work and follow-up emails and all the other stuff to go along. And I have taken all the comments and from what people have told me, and basically, again, I just said it in a nice way. I'll just say this again. Thank you, Village of Oregon. Thank you, Mark and team, for taking on some of that extra work for the fire district and being able to put it together, because front office staff in the fire district is myself, and that's it. So putting all this other stuff together and working through and thinking about things, we went out to, like you said, 26 or 27. We didn't go any further with it, but definitely some differences that how we have budgeted and how we're doing things maybe for the future. And then, as Martin said, you know, I go back to a conversation that I think about this every once in a while that Mike Grace had with me when I came here back in '16, and he says, Fire Chief, from 2000, and I think it was 2006 to 2016, the fire district for CIP spent $50,000 over a 10-year period. And he showed that to me, and he says, Fire Chief, what do you think of that? And I said, I think there's a lot of money that, you know, fire district should have been asking over that period to stay ahead and not play catch-up. And Phil, you probably remember those days as well as I do, that kind of stuff. So we're in a lot better position than we were a number of years ago. So again, you know, the things that I keep reminding ourselves and for bringing everybody together, our responses and making sure that our men and women are here, having people in the station, them are the key elements. I can't do it alone. Our men and women can't do it alone. You just need depth and all that kind of stuff. The other part that I will say, and I know Kathy and I talked about this, Kathy and I, Phil, we've been on different groups over the years. 2006, Kathy, was it, or 2008, when we all spent $8,000 in our different municipalities at the time to try to do consolidated talks and try to do, you know, bringing in RW management out of Appleton, basically. And I think there was eight municipalities, as I recall, that went in on that back then, and met with all of us and put some stuff together. And you know, the ships have sailed, and a lot of doors have closed elsewhere, meaning that people have made the decision. They built new stations. They built their, you know, different stations. They haven't came together. You know, I'll just say it. I said, you look at the Veronas, you look at the Fitchburgs, you look at McFarland, you
You look at Stoughton in different places, they've done a lot of things since then that, you know, we've always said about, you know, bringing more people together and doing consolidation. I will again say, and I will continue to say, no matter with a future build-out of anything that we do, Oregon's gonna need always a main station and a main location to be able to serve the people, but anything after that main location and the futures, and that you start looking 10 years out and other kind of stuff, purchasing together and doing more consolidation and cooperative efforts with our neighbors. You know, I'll take today again. You looked at, we had a fire in the town of Oregon today out in Raving Oaks this morning. It came in as a structure fire in one of the homes. By part of our automatic aid agreements today, we merged out there with about 4 different fire districts, or 4 different fire departments, all at one time. Successful outcome, basement fire put out in a very short period of time, within about 15 minutes after we all got there. And, things were mitigated, everything, and that kind of stuff. Yes, there's some damage to a home and all that kind of thing. We've got that part of it figured out for the responses, and we help each other out. And no matter if it's up in the town of Dunn where we can't get to fast, how we work back and forth, or if Fitchburg can't get down on here on the south side fast, we help Fitchburg out in return. Here nor there, we got those things out. But for the few of us that are left as districts and some of our larger areas and that kind of stuff, again, consolidated efforts and trying to bring people together. We're only fighting for the same men and women in our fire stations. We're competing against the wages instead of having wages basically paid out accordingly. And again, men and women that are in this fire service need calls, need volume and things of that nature. And one of the things about Oregon is, again, we have plenty of calls in a year, 1,900, getting close to 2,000 a year between both disciplines, fire and EMS. It's just one of those things people want to come here. But we have the turnover. We got to try to fix some of that kind of stuff. So this budget will help with that. But I am a very proponent with consolidation and bringing more districts together and more stuff together. So whatever we can do on that aspect, we'll continue that forefront as long as I'm around here. So.
Okay, anything else on the presentation?
Are you on to D?
We were just about to move there.
Oh yeah, we're going.
Okay.
Yep.
Sound like you were closing the meeting.
Oh, no. Yes, so, yeah, for 130 years, this group has been getting together in some way, shape, or form. People just like us, representing their communities, trying to improve or maintain our public safety, and taking a good look at our fiscal responsibility also for each of our communities. All very, very important, and which leads us to where we are today. Another big decision that we're faced with here is a new fire station facility of some kind, some shape or form, and the planning process thereof. So let's go on to item 4D and let's discuss that.
So basically, this next thing here, maybe it was bad wording on my part, but I put in here the fire station project, basically projected time frame and that kind of thing, a timeline, just to, again, people, for good or bad, like it or not, it's you know, going to calls and mitigating calls and handling incidents is the easy part of my job. And then there's the political sense of, you know, people being on one side of a conversation or the other kind of thing, kind of put, you could say you put the fire chief maybe as the, you know, as the crosshairs on that person. And it's probably not a good analogy to say that, but put everything run through that person. And, you know, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And I hear a lot of different things. Here nor there, at the end of the day, this is basically a kind of a snapshot of what I have seen done so far towards this. And again, you think about our capitals. I go back to our capital plans. Oregon had 0 capital plans when I first came here back in 16, and one of the things that I mentioned to Jeff, Phil, and the group that was with me at that particular time is we got to put some of this stuff on paper, and we start laying it out. That fire station project, whatever that may look like, was actually in one of the originals a few years earlier. COVID kind of pushed that back a couple of years and all that kind of thing. And now, all of a sudden, 2027, 2028 isn't that far away anymore. And it's probably not even a realistic number now to do the due diligence that we need to do for this project and the magnitude of that. So, and maybe it's because, I've always been a business person and everything else, it's kind of a placeholder in a capital plan. It may or may not be there, it might move a little, that kind of thing. I have no idea, but it is definitely getting attention and making people think about it and see where we want to go whenever that's going to be. There are some things that, like I've said before, that we're never all going to agree with each other as far as certain things, but we know the things that we can definitely go away from here, again, as I hear all the time, is we want to have people respond and we'll be able to do it in a timely fashion and we want to take care of our people. Those are the things that we can agree upon. So we know that in the future we're going to need to do some things. I will just tell you, Lisa sees it, I see it, the commission see it, with some of the things that are going on with our energy costs and the current operation that we have. I get the bill from WP&L or Lionel that says we're up 25% more our bill from last month, and all of a sudden it's costing us $3,000 a month to turn the lights on and to run that operation that we currently have today. So there are a lot of things that we have to look at for the sustainable future and all that other kind of stuff. Here nor there, this document here is 100% got Glenn written all over it, or the fire chief, or however you want to look at it. It's just trying to keep everybody, hey, these things are happening. We have some committees and we have some groups that are basically meeting and talking and all that kind of thing. And at the end of the day, we're not anywhere, no decision's been made and all that kind of stuff. The village has basically got a downtown study going to see where the downtown study and how any future plans with the fire district works downtown and all that kind of stuff. And then you got, some space needs and all that other kind of stuff that's just basically been identified from some of our men and women in the operation themselves. To take all of that, so I would take none of this that's set in stone. Don't ever take the stuff that's set in stone. It's, I hate to say government, but I don't know what Martin's thought about this is, but capital plans, they are basically there as a placeholder, but they are not poured in concrete, in my opinion. So this, it's something to think about, and all of that other kind of stuff that goes with it, and we'll bring it all together and make the hard decisions like we've done, you say for 130 years already, somebody has. At some point, we'll all come together and we'll figure that out. At the end, that downtown study will be taken care of. The fire district will take some looks at some different things, and we'll be back talking to the village board. I believe Martin Phil probably later on this fall after that's done to see where that all fits in, and then we'll have some conversation. I have heard from some village board members, and I don't want to pry, I don't want to go down that road with the, I'm just going to say the library project in itself. There's concern that we, make some maybe questionable decisions and spend money good after bad per se and all of that kind of thing. I think we've got a real good group that can work through it and really have a good time frame and all that kind of stuff, and I think all of that stuff will come together. I was just totally surprised last commission meeting, going back to Kathy on this 100,000 that the commission at this point has basically said, hey, fire chief, we want to bring you some help, we want to bring some dollars and cents to this project and maybe draw some plans, maybe help you with some more, studies and needs and whatever it might be, and have 100,000 available in 2025 when and if it's needed. And the commission has ultimately got the thumbprint on it and saying yay or nay on any expenditures. That's why that's very clearly noted in there. But I was surprised because, again, I know my group that's around me. Believe me, I know this group all too well, and $100,000 is a lot. I did not think that was going to be something that would be doable, and the board moved it forward and thought that to keep our momentum and to keep thinking about it and having some good answers for you people and others that are going to make these decisions later on, $100,000 is probably well spent on a larger project. At this point, It's probably not even gonna be $100,000. Martin thinks it might be 40, Glenn thinks it might be 50 grand, whatever it might be, and we'll identify what we're looking for and put it in our RFP when and if we get to that bridge. That's kind of where it is. Derek is here tonight, he's basically representing the village as far as their lead, basically kind of looking with the ad hoc committee, the group there that reports back to the commission. And one of the things in the formation of the group, and I'll remind folks of this, is that the commission has ultimately got the say in the oversight of everything and that kind of thing. So everybody else is kind of advisory to the commission, and ultimate decisions are made at that commission level. So again, I think it's just the day and age in which we are at currently with dollars and cents, and money probably not going as far as it once did, that people are concerned. And different things, and I believe that's where it is. So, Derek, anything to add, or?
We're not to questions. Sorry, I'll wait.
Okay, Derek, anything to add?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. I think you pretty much covered it. I think the building committee is excited about the commission's decision to move forward with the space needs plan, so we can kind of get this project moving along a little bit, and then, with the completion of the downtown master plan, having conversations, once those two things are completed, we'll have a better idea where we are. So we'll be able to move forward from there.
Yes, Lynn.
So this, you sort of answered this for me a little bit, Derek. I guess what I'm wondering is, and along a similar vein of Kathy's question, what will the 100, whatever the number is, whatever this earmarked money is, what will that bring us? Because obviously the future is a lot of different choices. And so is this money set aside simply going to tell us what we need as opposed to designing things? I guess what I'm wondering is what can we expect coming out of the money that would be used there?
I think initially we're kind of looking at basically footprint of the building, what all needs to go within the building, and how, what kind of square footage that all takes up.
So more of a renovation side as opposed to the relocation, or would we be seeing both options?
No, I think it's really, we know right now there is inadequate training space. What does that training space need to look like?
Okay.
Is it 5% more, is it 25% more? There's inadequate sleeping space. Do we need 5 more rooms, do we need 10 more rooms? What's the admin needs? And the ability for a consultant to then project those needs out over 5, 10, 25, 50 years, and so that when we're making decisions about building a new building, we're not then coming back around 3 years, 5 years and going, gee, I wish we could have built it like 5% bigger. That's really what I think the consultant we're hoping is going to help us sort of frame out what exactly the need is.
Yeah, and I was going to say, my hope, so I do this on behalf of churches. This is helping fire districts. This is out of my wheelhouse, but really getting an outside perspective on what are the space needs of the district, not only now, but what the district will look like in 30 years and what are the space needs then. Depending on the downtown master plan, what kind of footprint are we going to need, and also what are the future response times? And I know the chief has talked about that a lot, not only for the district now, but into the future, and what is the best location for all of that coming together. And having someone who has expertise in this, I think will allow us to possibly save money in the long run. I know $100,000 is not a little amount of money, but if we get down planning, and we found this out with the library in the village, we get done planning and we go, nuts, it doesn't fit. That creates a lot more problems than that I think we can avoid.
Thank you.
And part of that will also be, can we have trucks to be able to drive through the building rather than have to always be backing up? Can we have doors wide enough so that the doors of the vehicles don't hit the walls as we do back up? So just a different look as to what we have today.
And putting them wrong with the Madison Fire also offered?
Yeah, so it isn't actually Madison Fire. So as part of the International Association of Fire Chiefs, the IAA, which is basically the International Association of Firefighters Union, works in conjunction with the Fire Chiefs Association across the country. We're looking at when and if we look at a different site. And by whatever anybody hears out of me tonight, or anybody listening on local media or any of the above, or paper, or whoever picks it up, no decisions have been made either way, any of the above. We know that we need to do some things differently. And I'll just put in there, we talk about any cooperative efforts and things of that nature. You know, I'll be honest with you, we've got some conversations going with some of our neighbors looking at ladder purchases and all the other thing. But ladders sitting, for us to go and say, so we got $1.3 million or $1.6 million or whatever it is a few years out after we build a building to take care of some of our 3-story buildings around here in the village, having a ladder sit anywhere more than 5 miles away from the village borders where the 3-story buildings are, ISO, Insurance Services Offices, will not recognize that ladder, and it doesn't do anything for our ISO ratings or anything on paper. The ladder needs to be within 5 miles of where it's going to be used. So for me to bring a ladder across, that's just the way the rules are.
Kind of veered off the point you started to make about the Fire Chiefs Association.
Oh, Fire Chiefs Association is doing that study, putting all this stuff together and going to lay it all out, and also look at the center of the fire district when and if we move out of that location down there. And that's for no cost. That's free. That is free, no cost. So $0. So there's just a lot of unknowns. So
When will they have that information?
probably about 12, 15 months. So we'll see where that goes. Yes?
Is part of is the commission that is deciding this, the ad hoc committee or whatever, also looking at what other communities have done, going to other fire stations, looking at anything like that?
They have not at this point. And again, when you start looking at other places, it brings in a lot of different conversations that I don't know if we're prepared to have at this point. Again, what I mean by that is, again, there's a point in time where we are going to need more space to make some of these other things happen in the current footprint that we're on. And that's just not where it is. I think that, again, this consulting and these dollars that the commission has basically laid there now, I look at it as kind of twofold, and I think we kind of heard it here with some of the group tonight, is basically to see what direction the downtown study plan goes, and to see if that current footprint works just on that same site, to see if, you know, hey, this is going to go up, this is what it's going to look, and then you hear Kent talking about maybe changing some of the direction, and I know, again, different things that have been talked about to try to make the drive-through, maybe put this addition on the north side of the fire station through what the hitching post is today and changing some traffic direction, and maybe not do anything to the south. There's a lot of different unknowns, but ultimately at the end of the day, the downtown study is the first and fundamental thing that we're looking at, and we're going to let that go through, and then we're going to build upon that, making sure that everything else works. So there's just time and conversation.
Back on that too. And although there is a building committee, all the decisions are going through the Fire-EMS District Commission, so I mean, it's just purely advisory as far as what that committee does.
Can I just follow up and say, as part of the library building committee, it was very helpful for us to go see what was out there, and it doesn't mean you're going to like McFarland Safety Center and going, oh, we should do this, right? Like obviously that's outside of the price range of what we would expect here, right? But there are other places you can look at too, maybe going to other more rural areas to see what they've done when they've expanded. It doesn't mean that just to get a sense for what the wants are versus the needs, you know, what we can pay for, what's out of our reach, you know, just to have those visuals to understand what the possibilities are, and then you can narrow it down.
Yeah.
And just for what it's worth, that's just my opinion.
And I know in subsequent, you know, earlier meetings that we had other years with the village, I remember one of the trustees, Mike, basically, you know, there's some point we were kind of thinking about maybe doing some satellite stations further on the west and maybe use that location. It's basically something needs to be done with that 85-year-old part of the apparatus bay. You and everybody around this table, the village and all the rest of the district partners basically have invested in that building, and that building now I think is like 23 years old, Lisa, as I recall, or thereabouts. You got some good stuff to build upon and that kind of thing. And from my understanding, I was not around. There was some talk when that was built that building was built to do some stuff going towards that south area and do something with that apparatus bay at a later date. And originally that building, what was that, a couple $1 million originally?
$2 million.
$2 million 23 years ago?
Well, what a bargain, huh?
Oh, what a bargain. If you only knew, right? If you only knew. So.
What's it worth on Zillow now?
No. So that's where we are with that, so.
To be adding into your planning, it's not just space planning, it is growth planning. The village itself has doubled in size every 20, 25 years. Any building that you have, count that we're going to be doubled in size, not necessarily doubled in size in the towns. They are not growing at the same rate, if some are in fact shrinking. But that also has a challenge to justify, or you have a ladder, expensive ladder truck. And I've received quite a few questions on the need for that with our low-rise municipality and surrounding municipalities. And that what you were using, the 3-story thing, example, that other municipalities have not felt the need for a ladder at that level. So I'm looking at where that recommendation, is that a recommendation, a suggestion?
It's an NFPA ISO regulation, and I don't know where you would be looking at that does not have a ladder, because if you look at any of our communities around here, Stoughton has one, McFarland has one, Monona has one, Fitchburg has one, Verona has one, Mount Horeb has one, Wanakee has one.
That needs to be out there.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we have to have one, Arlen, to be like them, but as this growth and this build-out happens, those are things that happen with this district, and these are the needs, you know, as part of that. It's a good question, but it is going to be a necessity as this continues to build out. And we put in, what do we have in the CC? Somebody help me. In the CC properties, I think we got, 200 homes in the 4 different buildings that we have there with the main clubhouse in the middle. Again, they continue to build out. We can enforce fire code, we can inspect, we can do everything we need to do. We can try to put sprinklers in buildings and all that kind of stuff. But our limitation on ladders that we have today is, I go 20 feet tall, 24 feet tall is what I have. Any other ladders than that I need anywhere in the district, I have to utilize something from the outside. That's just my limitations, and that's what the cards that I'm dealt with here. And our cards, our pre-made cards, our responses are made accordingly to bring in outside resources to help with that. So again, as we continue to build out, it just, you know, I hate to say, you know, it's a cost of operations and making these things happen, but that's what happens when we bring more people in and all this other kind of stuff to do that, so.
And I'd like to share the Stoughton one. I mean, we're doing a lot of growth and development in Stoughton. They needed the taller ladder truck because of the big development that they had. So in our agreement with the town's share, they did pull that out, so towns aren't contributing to the cost of the ladder, because it was pretty specific to their, you know, new development in the city, and it wasn't an apparatus they were going to be using out in the towns or that they needed to serve the towns. So it kind of was a compromise that came out of talking about it and getting the group together.
Thank you. Good point, good point.
Very good.
Okay.
All good conversation. Anything else on the future facility planning? Derek, you good? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to announcements. Oregon area
EMS 130th year celebration on August 25th, 2024, from 2:30 to 7 at the Oregon Fire Station. Award ceremony starts at 3:15. Anybody else have anything to add? Hearing none, we also have a 2024 Easy Money raffle sponsored by the Oregon Area EMS Association. Drawing held on Friday, December 6th, 2024 at the Oregon Fire Station. And lastly, the fall 2024 Joint District Meeting planned for Wednesday, September 25th at 6:30 right here. Anything else for announcements? Anybody like to share? Hearing none, we can move to adjournment of all boards. We'll start with the town of Dunn.
Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
There's seconds. All those in favor, signify by saying
Aye.
aye. Chair votes aye, we're adjourned.
Town of Oregon.
Without objection, the town of Oregon meeting is adjourned.
Town of Rutland.
I move to adjourn the Rutland meeting.
Second it?
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
OAT Commission, all in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are officially adjourned.